name is Jody Kent-Levy. I'm the Executive Director of the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, and very grateful to be here.
My name is Eddie Ellis, and I work for the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. I'm also happy to be here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donna Epps, and I lead Public Policy and Strategic Alliances at Verizon, and very pleased for the invitation to join you all.
Good evening, my name is Fernando Bermudez, survivor of over 18 years in prison, exonerated over 10 years ago. So pleased to be here tonight.
So in the next hour, we're gonna have a conversation. And over the conversation, I have told our panelists that we're gonna have an engaging dialogue. And the first thing we want to do is why I wanted to have the introductions is kind of start with a story about how one moment can make a difference. So a little over a year ago, I was invited by one of Donna's colleagues to join Verizon at what at the time was Verizon Center, I think. It still was Verizon Center. Yeah, and for an event. And during the event, you know, talking to different people in the suite, I met Jody. And the funny thing about Jody is Jody and I live a block away from each other. We've probably lived a block away from each other for about 7, 8 years, however long that we both lived in the same neighborhood. So she's off of 14th, I'm on 15th. So I don't know why it took us all that time to meet at the Verizon Center. So just meeting Jody, she started telling me she's the executive director of the Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth. I was like, what's that? And so we had coffee and she started to talk to me about her work. And having practiced law before I joined Deloitte, I was actually shocked that one, I had no idea that juvenile justice was its own thing and that we still needed it. Because when I was in law school, I just assumed that we weren't locking up kids and we weren't sentencing them, you know, for life without parole, or we weren't doing all these different things that apparently we were still doing and still continue to do. Fast forward, Jody introduced me to Eddie, and then we had a brainstorming session saying we could do an impact day together. We submitted our proposal, thanks to Greater Washington, and we had our first impact day in June. Fast forward, so then Verizon hosted a reception for the campaign, and I got to meet Donna. And so Donna's gonna talk about the work that Verizon's doing on behalf of the campaign and along this issue. And then when I had the idea to say, we should do a movie screening when Just Mercy comes out, I went to Jody and I said, Jody, do you think maybe we can get somebody from Just Mercy to talk? And now we've met Fernando. So he has completed the circle. So again, just that one moment in time really makes a difference. So with that, I want to really talk about what is criminal justice reform and what is the different work and perspectives that each of our panelists do. So I'm going to start with Jody because I had mentioned the juvenile justice and you have been an advocate. I actually would like you to just give a brief overview of what's really recently happened in the last week, which is really monumental.
Sure. So first of all, can we give it up for Rashida? Because she is a force of nature. Meeting her at the Idina Menzel concert, I believe it was a huge blessing for me personally, and certainly for our organization, and being able to partner with her since and with Deloitte. Last year's Impact Day, I just want to say, was absolutely profound. One of the things that Brian often talks about when he speaks, in his book, which everybody should read, he talks about the power of proximity and just how important it is to become proximate with injustice and with those impacted by injustice. And what Impact Day was an opportunity for Deloitte employees to be proximate with about 24 people who were told as children they were worth nothing more than dying in prison, and who are now free because of a series of reforms that have taken place over the last decade with Brian's leadership and our partnership along the way. And it was a really beautiful day that we got to spend with the very passionate, talented Deloitte employees and the individuals in our Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network, which you'll hear more about. So to answer your question, We've been working to end life without parole and other extreme sentences for children for over a decade now. And this week, the governor of Virginia signed into law a piece of legislation that creates parole opportunities for people who went to prison as children and were transferred to the adult system, received adult sentences, went into adult prisons after 20 years or after no more than 20 years. So that means that people who went in with sentences of 60, 70, 80, life without parole, those individuals are now parole eligible as a result of the legislation that was passed in Virginia and signed into law by Governor Northam on Monday. And I want to say that happened. It was a long slog in Virginia. There were a lot of really serious challenges that we thought were not going to be surmountable, frankly, at times. The courts in Virginia were very reluctant to implement reforms handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court. They, at every step of the way, they tried to thwart the decisions from the court. The state Supreme Court, held a decision that basically told everybody who would have been eligible under these Supreme Court decisions that they were not eligible for relief. It has been an absolute nightmare for the people serving these sentences in Virginia and for their families. And one of the things I think is important to recognize is, and you see this in the film, is that families are incarcerated along with the loved ones who are serving these sentences. They are living through this hell with them. And I think that one of the things that we saw in Virginia was the power of these families to sustain, to press on against all odds. They pushed through year after year after year, standing by their loved ones who were told there was no hope for them, that they were going to die in prison. And they held on to that hope for their loved ones. And they were the face of the legislation that passed. They were the ones there in the legislature who pushed the bill through, including one of your incredibly talented colleagues, Kimberly Garrett. So let's give her a huge shout out. So that's the recent development. We hope that Maryland will follow suit. Maryland is actually one of the states that has yet to ban life without parole for children. Donna, you live there, right?
I do.
Okay, let's work that because really, Virginia was an outlier. There has been a very steady national trend moving away from these sentences and away from this practice over the last few years. Virginia was an outlier, and now Maryland is, so we're headed there next week.
So one of the things you mentioned was about ICANN. So Eddie, can you talk a little bit about what the work has been done, what the work you've been doing with ICANN?
Thank you. ICANN is Incarcerated Children Advocacy Network. We have over 140 members nationwide now, and it's been around 2014. It's a group of people who were sentenced to harsh sentences, life without parole, de facto life sentences, and other harsh sentences. I was sentenced to 22 years. I faced 75 years in prison here in Washington, D.C. And we do a lot of collaborating together. We have programs within the campaign to help ICANN members. We have the professional coaching program. We have professionals come in and work with our ICANN members to help them with resume and other things. We have regional connector program. We have former life sentence children in different states, 7 different states, to find resources on the ground for those who are coming home. And Jody has allowed us in the last 2 years to have our self-care retreats, where we are able to take 15 to 17 former life sentence children to nice places. We went to Scranton, Pennsylvania the first year, and last year we went to Dexter, Michigan on the water. And we had social workers there to accompany us to talk about the pain that we've been through as children. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us growing. But we, testify in our states and different bills. We support bills, we do op-eds, we help out with a lot of different stuff. But the thing is, it's a family of men and women who are now men and women who went to jail as children, who come together and support each other through emails, through phone calls, through our national convening, our self-care retreats. And it's just a wonderful family of people that come together to support each other. and we do a lot around the nation to support different bills, different movements, you know, and it's just, like, again, I can't say it enough. It's a wonderful, wonderful family of formerly incarcerated people who help, you know, each other out.
Thank you for that. And so turning to the work that Verizon's been doing, you know, in this day and age, having a corporation come out and be very public and make a stance is pretty amazing. So how did you get that done?
First, let me just say, I'm the co-chair of the Rashida Fan Club. I think the chair is over there on the other side. But yeah, so my role is to focus on tech policy, and I spend most of my time doing that. But every year, we try to think about, you know, what more can we be doing to have a bigger impact? And really, how can we use our voice and our influence to address a broad societal issue? And so a little over a year ago, we decided that criminal justice reform was that issue. And unbeknownst to me, when I raised this issue with our general counsel, Craig Silliman, he had a real passion for the issue, and he had actually just finished reading the Ferguson report, and he was like, I'm so glad you raised this. I was somewhat prepared to have to make a case and really advocate and push and what, but not at all. I mean, the leadership, really under Craig's leadership, has been really enthusiastic and embraced the issue. And things kind of came to a head a little quicker than, we were sort of trying to figure out, well, what should we do, and then the First Step Act popped up. And so I think that was really fortuitous, because it really sharpened our thinking and forced us to sort of get our act together. And so we started with advocacy, because we are in the legal department, and that's what we know, and that's what we do, is we push for public policy, smart policies. And so we started engaging on federal bills, primarily speaking out in support of legislation, but also using Craig's platform, because he's a general counsel of a Fortune 15 company, chief legal officer, and sort of having him, positioning him to focus on the injustices of a system that, you know, he certainly has benefited from, became really compelling for us. But honestly, we begin to think about, this is great, you know, we can support legislation, but how can we put more meat on the bones? And we were really looking for how could we sort of expand our role and make a difference. And right around that time, a colleague said, actually, there's this wonderful organization, the Campaign for the Fair Citizen. You really should meet the executive director. And so we did. And I have to tell you that the meeting that we had with Jody and two of the ICANN members, one of them is in this room, Xavier and Eric, it's me, the general counsel, and my boss, and we sat there, and I've never been in a corporate meeting like that. After hearing their stories, as well as the work that they do, there first of all wasn't a dry eye in the room, and we said we have to figure out how can we help. How can we make a difference? And what we realized was this concept that Jody mentioned, that Brian talks about, is proximity. One of the things that we knew is that we had a large corporate network, and most of the folks in that network were not proximate and had no idea about what was really happening with our criminal justice system, and really didn't have much frame of reference or context for people impacted by the system. And so we started our relationship with the campaign by having a reception, which we really just reached out to our network and said, you know, come to this event and hear about this great organization. And the response, frankly, was overwhelming, and that sort of bolstered us. Lots and lots of folks in the tech telecom space came out and were really impressed, got the book, and continued to be interested and engaged. And then we decided we need to expand our pro bono program, because we are lawyers. So this is what we do. Unfortunately, DC had a reform juvenile justice law that we could engage in. And so where our work stands now, we are really still at very early stages of trying to build this out. But we've expanded our pro bono program to represent folks who were incarcerated as children, in addition to representing folks to get their records expunged and sealed, because we didn't realize that the majority of people who are eligible for expungement and record sealing don't ever get the relief, because they have such difficulty trying to navigate the Byzantine petitioning process that is often in place. And so we're doing that, but we're also really interested in these automated expungements. It seems that, you know, we do so many cool things with technology. Surely we should be able to automatically give people the relief that they're entitled to. And so we're looking at that from sort of a technology perspective, but also certainly interested in bills around the country that are pushing that as well. So just super excited to be in partnership with the campaign, but also kudos to Deloitte on your Impact Day. My ears perked up when Rashida told me about that, because I said we're looking for ways that we can make an impact and make our work meaningful and real. And so we'll be certainly looking at the model that you guys put together with that.
And we're also hoping that if our proposal gets approved again, that you'll be a partner this year. So Fernando, you know, as you've joined our family here, I think the issues that were in the film are most relevant to you, and really want to share with our audience, you know, your story and how you even got involved with being a surrogate for Just Mercy.
Well, thank you everyone for showing up today. We really appreciate it. And also we were able to celebrate the 175th year for Deloitte today. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing this year, you know, right now. And so it's a blessing because I can be here with you celebrating this moment of freedom and the triumph of this movie in sparking the conversation for justice. In 2015, Khalif Browder was 22 when he hung himself after 3 years at Rikers Island. In 1991, I was 22 when I entered Rikers Island. My hopes and dreams dashed, and the immigrant dream that my Dominican parents had for me was definitely postponed. And I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. I was in shock that I was charged with murder. I knew where I was that day, and I boldly told the police and prosecutor where I was, but they didn't want to hear it. They had what was called tunnel vision and sought to only really just focus on me, because there was a teenage girl who had selected my picture because I had been arrested before for marijuana. And little did I know that that arrest would change the course of my life, and that I would end up in the mugshot books and thereby selected, and that things would go from bad to worse, not just at Rikers Island and me trying to survive the experience of dealing and surviving with 14,000 detained souls, many of whom were very angry to be there. But it was a matter of also believing and placing my hopes in the American criminal justice system that it would prevail for my family and I. And it didn't. And so for the next 18 years, I would survive in a 6 by 9 foot maximum security cell, just trying to keep my wits about myself. There was a lot of themes today in the story, which I hope we'll discuss about. But for me, it was a matter of surviving and teaching myself the law, learning it when I didn't know it, educating myself, availing myself of any educational opportunity. For me, a book was like a garden in my back pocket. And I just sought to survive. And unfortunately, it took 18 years to finally prove my innocence. It was a horrific experience in which the collateral damage affected my parents, affected my brothers, my sister, my grandmother. I lost many family members, and I didn't get to celebrate many good times with them as well. And during the course, I met my beautiful wife who's with me today, and she endured the wrongful incarceration with me. And today I can proudly say that one of the reasons I live for is my children, because we had children while we were incarcerated. And every day to me is a victory that I can walk them home, not just from school when I was able to, but also wake up to them and tell them I love them and see them progress. And so out of this experience, and now being 10 years free, having survived that terrible ordeal in which I am truly afflicted with post-traumatic stress disorder, that is the process of still sometimes feeling like I'm incarcerated, the process of hypervigilance, paranoia, distrustful of people, and things like that. But throughout all of that, what's kept me going is the need to help support my family. And so I just started cold calling, self-marketing myself as much as I could. And I got educated, I got involved with the Innocence Project. And then after about 6 years of doing that, I moved to North Carolina. And I began the process of building my home and everything. And it became a very difficult situation because after kind of taking an academic hiatus to try to finish my book, which I hope will finally be done this year, I realized that I was empty and I was torn inside despite the satisfaction that I knew of coming home to my family every day. And one of the reasons I felt torn inside was because my family continues to be divided over my wrongful incarceration and the family conflict that it continues causing, whether it's over money, whether it's over jealousy, whether it's over the psychological damage that some of my family members refuse to take advantage of when offered. But recently, how I became a surrogate is something quite amazing to me. I had been depressed and I had sought the refuge in doing jiu-jitsu for about 3.5 years when I realized that I needed to stop that and I needed to take a break and start trying to think about making some money. But first, I helped my daughter out because she was in a very difficult situation. And right after I helped her with a car that she needed, I got a phone call from Represent Justice and they said, "Would you like to come work for us?" And I said, the timing could not be better to help my daughter pay off that car. And today she's doing eyelashes, she's doing so good. And she gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren who we're so proud of and who we're finally gonna see again. And so today I'm an advocate not only for children and the juvenile justice system because I was struck by seeing the juvenile delinquents and imprisonment of so many well-meaning and well-deserving folks inside prison. And I've devoted myself to returning and doing speaking again and trying to get the message out and trying to understand my situation. That now I can take a new challenge, but also improve myself through commercial real estate investing. And during the 6 months of my depression, that's what I started doing. I started realizing that if I studied that, that can give me a chance to help my children learn a skill that we can transform into fighting against injustice in the criminal justice system. And that's why we're here today.
So thank you for that. Now we've set the context. Now, because part of one of our core businesses at Deloitte is accounting, I wanted to give you a couple of stats. So to understand the real problem, the growing trend of wrongful convictions is about 2 to 10%. So out of a population of 2.3 million individuals who are incarcerated, that equates to about 46,000 to 236,000 people who are wrongfully convicted. To end the stigma, African Americans are 13% of the US population, but the majority of innocent defendants is African American people, which is about 47% of 1,900. Which equates to 893 people. And that date is as of October 2016. When we talk about giving hope, as of April 2019, there were 2,673 individuals on death row. 1,499 have been executed. But out of that number, 166 were exonerated. So that is 166 innocent people that have been on death row, which is about 6%. And truly, we cannot execute innocent people. So when you're thinking about this problem and the proximity, and as humans, we have a tendency to not necessarily be concerned about things until they are personal to us. Let me also give you some numbers. At Deloitte, we always hear about we're in the war for talent. We're in the war for best talent. But this is the problem. We have 2 million people that are incarcerated, 6 million people that are either on probation or parole, and 68 million people in the US who have criminal records. So if we're trying to figure out how to take it to the next level as we're in this industrial, we're already starting from behind because we're not maximizing all this wonderful talent out here. So one of the things we wanted to talk about the theme of what we saw in Just Mercy. And so the 3 things that really, I think the film really talks about is understanding the problem, which we've talked a little bit about here, ending the stigma, because it's not just about the individuals, it's also the families and the impact in the communities, and about giving hope. So I'd like to talk to my panel talk about either ending the stigma or giving hope. Who would like to start?
Giving hope to others or hope for myself? Hope for myself. First, I'm gonna start with myself. I served 10 years in solitary confinement. 6 years in the highest level prison in the United States in Florence, Colorado. And at times I didn't think that I would make it out of jail, even though I had an out date. Mentally, I didn't think I would make it out of jail. And I was charged in jail also with a murder in jail that I did not commit. The murder I came in jail on, I did commit. The murder in jail, I did not commit. I made parole, was getting ready to go home, and they pulled me and told me, "You gonna tell me something?" And I decided not to tell them because I didn't believe in snitching. You know, you do your job. You have a $200,000 camera system in the jail, you can't figure out who done what. And I gave up. I actually gave up. I gave up hope. And I remember an old nurse, Miss Green, came to my door one day, and she said, "Baby, it ain't over until you give up." And her voice reminded me of my grandmother's voice. And from that, I started to get up, exercise again, and fight for my life again. Because I was really facing life again in another state that I'm doing time in. And everything worked out right for me in the case situation. But emotionally and mentally, I dealt with a lot of stuff. And when I came home in 2006, this will be my 14th year home. I came home in 2006. And what I said to myself is that God gave me a chance to be free again. What am I going to do with my life? With my life, I'm going to give people hope that we can, right? I didn't think that I would ever be married again, because I was married before when I met my wife. And she gave me hope that I am worthy to have someone to love me, to be respected, and I need to do the same thing. So with me, I live my life every day to try to be an example to other people and to give people hope, especially family members. There's a lot of family members I talk to who say, "You know what, my loved one could do the same thing that you do." And I always tell them, "You're right, right?" But the reality is this: if we don't have the hope, right, everything is murky, everything. And I live my life today to say, you know what, even when it's murky, I get up and walk. I get up and do something. You know, because every day I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't. I'm gonna come to work and do my work. But guess what? Emotionally, I'm gonna be scarred for the rest of my life from solitary confinement. But the hope is, guess what? If I get up and do something, I can find something to do with my life. And that's assist others who's going through the system. So that's my hope. Help other people even when you're going through something, but give time to yourself to continue to heal and just be the best person you can. Not perfect, but the best.
I'll speak to the stigma. I think one of the things that's really important to recognize that it doesn't come out as much in the film, but certainly in the book and the documentary about Brian that HBO did, if you haven't seen it, True Justice or something, anyway, is, looking at our history and how we got where we are. Slavery in this country was about indentured servitude, but it was also about claiming that a certain set of people, that Africans who were brought here, kidnapped here as slaves, were less than the people who look like me and my ancestors. There was a narrative that took hold during slavery that Blacks in this country were less human than whites. And that narrative has lasted ever since. Mass incarceration is a most recent example of that. That narrative has taken hold in all sorts of forms of federal policies, all sorts of different structures and systems over the years. And we see it in the ways that children are sentenced to life without parole. Black children receive life without parole at a per capita rate that is 10 times that of white children. In the mid-1990s, there was a criminologist who came up with this theory that there was going to be a spike in violent juvenile crime committed by, quote, super predators. And all over the media, there were pictures of Black teenagers that were depicted as super predators. They were stripped of their humanity, of their status as our children. And that happened because of our long history of racism in this country, structural, steady, systematic racism. So when we do that over and over and over, and people like me benefit from it, right? People who look like me and my ancestors benefit from that. You know, we see how the structures continue to evolve. And you look at the prison system and Alabama death row, it's not just Alabama. That's one of the really important things to lift up after this film. This is not just Alabama, this is Washington, D.C., this is Maryland, this is my home state of Massachusetts. You know, blue states, red states, it doesn't matter. It's Black folks that we're locking up because of this long history. And there is a stigma that has continued. The kids that went to prison as quote unquote super predators are some of the best people I know, including my friend Eddie here, my colleague Xavier there. I have 6 people on my staff who were convicted of murder as children, and they're among the best humans that I could ever imagine working with. They have deeply enriched my life, my family's life, and the life of many others. And I think that part of what we have to overcome is that stigma, that there is such a thing as a super predator, right? That there is such a thing as a monster. Even this notion that as people come home that they're labeled as felons, ex-offenders, we can't use that language anymore because it's dehumanizing. It allows that narrative to continue, especially when we're talking about people of color. So I think that's, you know, my call to action with folks, you know, is really about, one, go visit, first of all, read the book, this is great. Go visit Montgomery and go visit the Legacy Museum that Brian has put together down there, and the Lynching Memorial, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, because they lift up this history and they show the connection between slavery and mass incarceration and all the things in between, and how it lives on today. So I think that history is important. Everybody needs to experience that and know it as you know, our history in this country. And you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier with proximity, you know, becoming proximate to injustice can be done in a range of ways. Reading the book is one way, sharing the book with your friends. The DC jail is right down the street, and actually the current head of the Department of Corrections in DC is very open and willing to show people what's in, you know, what he's got going on inside, and they've got a number of great programs that Eddie and others are helping out with. I encourage people to go visit it. It's just a few blocks from us. And, you know, be proximate, get to know these people, because as long as we other them, as long as we let that stigma continue, we can't heal, we can't come together as the community we are, and we can't have the kind of hope that Brian calls us to have. So I encourage you to become proximate, join us, you know, at the campaign. I mean, obviously we've been so grateful. The other thing I will say about hope is, man, Verizon coming out and saying they oppose life without parole for children, woo, that gave me hope. And it gave hope to hundreds of people around the country serving these sentences who feel unseen. They feel like they've been disappeared from society. And then there it is, you know, Verizon out there saying that we shouldn't be doing this to kids. So, yeah, I'm hopeful because of you all and these incredible people who enrich my life and are extraordinary human beings that I'm really grateful to know.
I'm gonna pick up on what Jody said, and I'm gonna focus on hope. I've really been struck by the reaction that we have gotten from speaking out on criminal justice reform. What I didn't mention earlier was one of the things we did to try to create proximity for others who kind of like us, and to be honest, were kind of sleepwalking through life with respect to this issue, was we had 3 or 4 convenings last year, events, where we invited folks who were on the ground doing work like the campaign, the social justice organizations, advocates, impacted people, as well as, policymakers from the right and the left. Really what we wanted to do was to expose our world and audience to, another part of what's actually going on right here in our communities. And we weren't really sure, are people really gonna come and show up? Because these aren't the type of, policy discussions that we typically host. And I will tell you, the rooms have been full. In each case, our general counsel was sort of a moderator, and we've had so many, first of all, we've been introduced to so many new people, not just in the criminal justice reform battles on the ground, but other people in the corporate space who were A, interested, and B, sort of saying, by you speaking out and doing this, it helps us with our leadership. We can demonstrate that, the sky didn't fall. You actually spoke out on a, what can be a violent offense, not just nonviolent offenses, and it's really important. So, and then the impact that I've seen inside our own organization, I think it's easy for people to make assumptions about each other and to presume who's gonna care about this issue, who's gonna not care. And I have seen, frankly, our own staff and Verizon employees have a sense of passion and mission and empathy and really kind of not just awakening, but embracing of we need to do something. So when we put out a call for volunteers for this pro bono work, we had actually have more people willing to volunteer than we could actually get cases. And I guess what makes me hopeful is that the individual interactions that I've seen where people now are aware, they care, and they want to know what can I do. The national conversation that we're having about this issue in a very real way, and I operate in the political space, I'm sure a lot of you guys do too, to see my colleagues on the right and our legislative team who have embraced this, and hearing stories from advocacy groups who say, after you sent your lobbyists into some of the Republican offices to talk about various federal bills that we've supported, we could tell a difference after you came. The reaction and the reception that we got on this issue was markedly, more positive. And so that has really been rewarding to just know that in this chaotic, fractured, polarized environment, that this has been an issue where people have A, reached across the aisle, but B, reached across the aisle in a more, sort of literal form outside of our policymakers, but just in our own, company and our broader, corporate network. That's been really encouraging. So I do have hope, and especially with folks like the campaign and ICANN members on the front lines, helping people to really humanize what's happening and who is it happening to, and the incredible talent. As an employer, a large employer like you guys, we are looking at what more can we do besides just ban the box? How can we figure out, how can we be more intentional about being a second chance employer? Because there is a race for talent, and we can't afford to leave anything on the table. And we as a society have done that for far too long.
I like to think of the poet Emily Dickinson, who wrote that hope is that thing with feathers that perches in your soul and sings a tune and never stops at all. For me, hope is what kept me alive throughout the whole situation. It's what made me believe, not just to connect with faith in God, but also hope that love would conquer all, not just through the pro bono attorneys who assisted me, even in Washington, D.C. I'll tell you why, because one of attorneys, Barry Pollock, was actually a certified public accountant before he became an attorney. And he ended up not only exonerating me, but someone else before me. Today he's working the WikiLeaks case, and talk about a challenge with that, for whatever that's worth. But hope is every day what, as Eddie others pointed out, what keeps you fighting against that disruption in your mind. Because your enemy is your mind sometimes. It can be your best friend, but it can also be your enemy through the things that happen in your mind, the pollution, the things we see, the things we think. And so I try to keep hope alive in my life to continue responsible, guided, and focused through the rigors and the routine of life so that I can get the repose to be able to think about what to do next about our criminal justice system. And so it's great that many more people are getting involved with power to make a difference in our criminal justice system, because many people in the criminal justice system are marginalized. That is, they are on the outskirts of society's not only power structure, but also the ability to afford higher education and other things that would put them in a better playing field in society. And so at Represent Justice, we're also doing something called Play by Justice, if I'm correct, and that's involving many power hitters involved, whether it's in Chicago, Illinois, with Kim Cook, the DA there, teaming up with rapper Common, and NBA players also going into youth detention centers and, tutoring and mentoring these kids as best as they could and influencing them that there is another way. And in turn, this influences society as a whole, that there is another way as well to help out. And that makes a difference.
So now I'm going to kind of open it up to questions. Alan has a mic. He's